Good morning. Did you know that our bodies are made up of teeny tiny building blocks called cells? We can't see them without using special magnifying tools, but each of our bodies is made up of trillions of these teeny cells that are a little bit like itty bitty Legos. And each of these cells doesn't last your whole life. Old cells die off as new ones replace them. Our bodies are always growing and changing, and all of our cells get replaced within every 7 to 10 years. I think that means that if you're older than 10, you probably didn't have any of your current living cells when you were born. You're still you, but you're also always becoming brand new. Really, you're always becoming more and more you. Well, my story today is about a girl who thought human cells were so fascinating that when she grew up, she traveled halfway around the world to study cell science. She studied and experimented, and she spent countless hours in a lab, and she learned an incredible amount about cells. She felt excited and alive studying something she loved. She could feel sparkles growing in her soul, and you could see those sparkles in her eyes. She was becoming more and more her real self. She was so busy with her studies that she wasn't able to visit her hometown for several years. Her work was fascinating, but it was also really demanding, often tiring, and sometimes even stressful. She grew to miss her family and her home more and more, and finally, one summer, she was able to take a break and go back there. On the long plane ride, she thought about all the little details she had been missing and how good it would feel to be back to all the old familiar comforts of home. When she closed her eyes, she could remember it all so well in perfect detail, just how it was when she'd left. And before she knew it, the plane was landing. She drove the roads to her family home, and she got a warm, fuzzy feeling from the familiar landmarks, the hills and curves and landscape that she had passed countless times in years past. She finally pulled in the driveway, and her parents came out to wrap their arms around her and squeeze her very hard. And this felt good to be held in those arms after so long. The family dog, who had been young and bouncy before she left, now barked at her, but then switched to a happy tail wag when he recognized who was here. She took her luggage into the room that had always been her bedroom, but she was surprised by how different the room looked. It had been painted a different color and it had different furniture, but her parents had kept a bed in there for when she returned. As she settled in, she found more and more things had changed since she left. It felt weird and unexpected. She found her old favorite jacket in the closet and she put it on, but it didn't fit anymore and was too tight. There were new neighbors and the main street businesses had changed. And instead of feeling comfortable and at home in this town, she now felt new and awkward. She went back to the house and tried to play ball with the dog, but being much older than he used to be, he had no interest in getting up off his comfy spot on the couch. Well, the next day was Sunday, and she joined her parents in going to church. She had grown up going to this church, but as a kid, she had usually complained about it because on Sundays, that was a day off from school, and she just wanted to sleep in and hang out and ride her bike and, well, things that did not involve talking about churchy things. Yes, she had had really fun times at church too and had made friends there, but it was always her parents who had made her go. Now, today, it was her own idea to go with them. When she walked into the building, she right away noticed how it smelled. It was a smell familiar all the way down deep into her bones. The smell itself wasn't necessarily good or bad, it was just so familiar. She sat in a pew, and that felt familiar too, with her back against the wood set at that exact angle. She looked around, and she was surrounded by strangers in this place where she used to know so many faces. And then she looked again a little more closely, and she realized that she actually did know several people here, mixed among some new people. They just looked a little different than when she'd last been here. The service was a combination of old and new. They still lit the same chalice and said some of the same words. And there were also new words and songs and things like that. And it actually felt really good. After worship, she was able to talk to lots of people she had known from all her years at this church. And each person was a combination of same and different and old and new, too. Suddenly, she realized that this church and this town and the people in her home, it all was a lot like the cells in our bodies, always growing and changing, a combination of old and new, and adding and subtracting and coming and going. Church was the same in all the important ways. The building had been standing for almost 200 years. Now, everything about it over the years had gradually been replaced, including the people and the roof and the paint and the books, all of it. And that was necessary. But what was the same was that the people were still connected to each other. And in a way, even connected to all the first people who had been here 200 years ago and to all the people who would be here 200 years in the future. The work they were doing still had the same purposes, just growing and shifting in an invisible line. It became clear to the young woman that the necessary and familiar parts of what the church was all about depended on the changes. Just like how our bodies and ourselves need to keep changing to keep being who we are at our core. And this was true for the town, the home, her family, and even the dog, who wasn't so much into running anymore, but was still really skilled at loving and showed it with snuggles and bringing comfort to those returning from being away. Maybe we can keep this in mind as we start to go back to all kinds of things we've been away from. There will be things that change and grow and look unfamiliar at first and might feel awkward for a little while, including all of us. There will be the you-ness of you, the Jen-ness of me, and the South Church-ness of South Church. And beyond, these are always changing to become more and more of what we are at our core. It's like changing to become the same. I look forward to seeing your souls sparkling in your eyes as we sit in the pews that have always held our backs at that slightly reclined angle, beside new members of our community and old members of our community, under the same roof that will be made of all brand new healthy cells. I love you. Bye for now.